In tonight's news edition, His Majesty the King holds talks with the French President and economic and intellectual leaders during a visit that saw the signing of 6 bilateral agreements. The Prime Minister tells an IMF tape that Jordan has achieved positive economic indicators despite regional turmoil. And Scots vote on independence, with polls showing support by a slight edge for the union with England. Good evening and very warm welcome to the news. His Majesty the King held talks in Paris with French President François Hollande and economic and intellectual figures. The two leaders tackled regional political developments and economic and trade ties, which culminated in the signing of 6 cooperation agreements covering a host of key sectors. More on the visit in this report.
A tight schedule for His Majesty the King during a working visit to Paris. In talks at the Élysée, King Abdullah and French President François Hollande reiterated their commitment to combating terrorism and supporting the new Iraqi government. The two leaders also voiced their support for seeking a political transition in Syria and the resumption of peace talks between the Palestinians and the Israelis. The King stressed the importance of intensifying international efforts to revive Palestinian-Israeli peace negotiations that would deal with all final status issues. He also called for international and regional efforts to reconstruct Gaza in the aftermath of the Israeli offensive on the territory. The two sides also asserted the importance of the role the European Union is playing in Middle East peacemaking. They expressed support for the efforts of UN Secretary-General Representative Staffan de Mistura in this regard. During a meeting with French intellectual, political and academic figures, King Abdullah spoke about challenges facing the region and means to deal with them to ensure security and stability. At the bilateral level, France renewed its commitment to supporting Jordan's development plans and reforms with a focus on the energy and water sectors. King Abdullah and President Hollande reviewed ways to increase bilateral trade and economic exchanges with a special focus on water and environment, energy efficiency and renewable energy, transportation, agro-industry, education and information and communications technology. The King's visit saw the signing of 6 bilateral cooperation agreements covering key sectors, including bilateral accords to protect investments and prevent tax evasion and double taxation. The two leaders welcomed the signatures as a positive step, deepening the strategic bilateral relations.
Jordan and France signed 6 memoranda of understanding on the sidelines of the royal visit. 3 of them are related to government work, while the others are related to the private sector and the Aqaba Special Economic Zone. The memos regarding government work include a technical and financial cooperation program between the Planning Ministry and the French government for the period 2014 to 2016. The program covers the sectors of water, energy and municipalities. The second memo covers 5 water and sanitation projects in Amman and Irbid at a cost of around 83 million euros. While the third has to do with the media cooperation.
From France, King Abdullah will head to New York to join world leaders at the 69th UN General Assembly, where he will deliver a keynote address. Haddad for the news at 10.
Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour welcomed an International Monetary Fund team headed by IMF Mission Chief to Jordan, Christina Costiel, for a discussion of Jordan's reforms and economic indicators. At a meeting attended by Finance Minister Umayyad Oqan, the two sides discussed the 5th and 6th review conducted by the IMF mission of Jordan's National Economic Reform Programme. Mansour noted the positive economic indicators achieved by the kingdom this year, despite the tough regional circumstances, especially the challenges posed by the Syrian refugee crisis and the disruption of Egyptian gas supplies to the kingdom. The IMF mission chief said that despite the difficult regional conditions, Jordan has been posting positive indicators, but said its 3% growth rate fell below the aspired goals. The Minister of Finance said that the 5th and 6th reviews focus on all the financial and sectoral aspects. The IMF mission chief congratulated the government for the National Economic Reform Programme's successes, stressing that these reforms have helped improve the country's economy.
I think the reforms are bearing fruit, and I congratulated the Prime Minister that despite a really very difficult external environment, actually Jordan is doing well, and Jordan is showing resilience. So when you look at growth, it's increasing. It's not yet at the level where you would like it to be, but it's increasing to above 3%. The central bank is having ample reserves, and the Ministry of Finance and NEPCO are also doing their adjustment program. So it's really commendable how well Jordan's economy is doing despite a difficult environment.
And separately, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour discussed with new Chinese Special Middle East Envoy Zhong Xiaosheng Middle East issues and various areas of cooperation between Jordan and China. Mansour said that all the region's problems and challenges are the result of the failure to find a just and comprehensive solution to the Palestine issue. He commended Beijing's moral support of pan-Arab issues, notably the Palestinian cause, voicing his hope that China, as a big power, would help reach a solution to the Palestinian cause. On Sino-Jordanian ties, the Prime Minister said His Majesty King Abdullah's recent visit to China had opened wider scopes for bilateral cooperation, stressing the need to follow up on its outcome. Jordan, Mansour said, is interested in launching a railway project with Chinese help and expressed hope to set up a Chinese-Jordanian technology university in the kingdom. Also in our local news, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour called on the career exhibition, part of the National Employment Campaign, which was launched earlier this month. Up to 20,739 jobs are now up for grabs, covering a number of sectors that had been made available by the Labour Ministry and the private sector. Mansour praised the ministry's job creation effort, urging the media to highlight the figures of those employed in the first and second phases that are published on the National Campaign's website. Ministry of Labour Under Secretary Hamada Abu Nijmi said up to 52,799 people had found jobs under the first and second phases of the employment campaign. He added that an additional 4,400 jobs had also been provided in the last couple of months in the third phase. Now, in other news, French President François Hollande said his Air Force fighter jets will soon strike targets against Islamic State militants in Iraq once reconnaissance missions have identified targets. Hollande stressed that France would not go beyond providing air support and would not strike in Syria, where the Islamic State group has also captured territory. The French leader said he would inform the parliament of the planned action as soon as the first strikes occur. Hollande told a press conference he agreed to Iraq's request for air support at a meeting of his top defense and security advisors earlier in the day.
I have decided to respond to the request of the Iraqi authorities to provide air support. Our objective is to contribute to peace and security in Iraq by weakening the terrorists. I'm also saying clearly that I affirm the necessity of this help and this air support. We will not go beyond that. There will not be ground troops, and we will only intervene in Iraq.
Syrian Kurdish fighters engaged in a fierce battle with Islamic State fighters in northern Syria. Sources reported that members of the main Kurdish group in Syria clashed with IS near the Kurdish city of Ain al-Arab, also known as Kobani. Meanwhile, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said that in an advance near the border with Turkey, IS fighters seized a group of Kurdish villages near Kobani. The observatory added that 21 villages had fallen to IS terrorists advancing on the city. The deputy head of the Kurdish forces in Kobani said the militant group was committing massacres and kidnapping people in the newly seized areas. Armed Yemeni rebels pushed into the capital Sana'a after clashing with the army in the city's northwestern outskirts. The clashes marked an escalation of weeks of fighting and protests in which more than 40 people were killed. Residents of one district said the Shiite Houthi gunmen were advancing along a major route into the western edge of the city. A military source said Houthi gunmen had also attacked an army camp on the southern entrances of Sana'a, but soldiers repelled the assault. The Houthis have been involved in a decade-long conflict with the government, fighting for territory in the north. Scotland voted in a referendum on whether to stay within the United Kingdom or end the centuries-old union with England. From remote highlands and islands to the tough city estates of Glasgow, people were almost equally divided over a vote watched closely by Britain's allies, investors and restive regions at home and abroad. Pre-voting opinion polls gave the No campaign, or those in favour of remaining in the United Kingdom, just a slight edge. But hundreds of thousands of people still making up their minds held the key as polling stations opened. Here's more in this report.
He's one of Scotland's most famous products and until now has kept his views quiet on independence. But just hours before voting began, tennis star Andy Murray pledged his allegiance to the Yes campaign. He can't vote because he lives in England, but his decision to speak out at such a crucial moment underlines the vote's importance. With the Saltire flying in eastern Ukraine, it's no understatement to say that the world is indeed watching. Many wondering if Scotland does break away, who will follow next? Robert Halver is from Germany's Baader Bank.
If a majority of Scots vote for separation from the United Kingdom, we'll have a problem for the Eurozone. It would mean very clear support for all those who think they too should separate from their country, the Basques, the Catalans and the Belgians with Flanders and Wallonia, who also seem to have problems with each other. Above all, it would be very, very bad for the idea of European integration.
The potential consequences of the vote have put markets on edge, with sterling set to tumble should Scotland say yes. Berenberg's Rob Wood.
Sterling has fallen a little bit, but not very much, I think, and would fall a lot further if Scotland voted yes. So no, I don't think people are prepared for a yes vote. I think it would come as a significant shock if it happened tomorrow morning.
Turnout is expected to hit a historic high, with 97% of the electorate registered to vote. The final opinion polls gave the No campaign a slight lead, but with as many as 600,000 still seemingly undecided, the UK's fate really is in the balance.
Australian police launched the biggest counter-terrorism raids in the country's history. More than 800 police were involved in the pre-dawn raids across the country. Police said at least 15 people were detained, with one man charged with a serious terrorism-related offence. Prime Minister Tony Abbott said militants connected with the radical Islamic State group were planning to behead a member of the public in Australia. The raids came just a day or days after Australia raised its national terror threat level to high for the first time. It cited the likelihood of terrorist attacks by Australians radicalised in Iraq or Syria. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko appealed to the US Congress for military aid and more sanctions against Russia and a special security status. Poroshenko met US Secretary of State John Kerry to discuss diplomatic means to handle the ongoing separatist movement in eastern Ukraine. A ceasefire in Ukraine was called on September the 5th after heavy battlefield losses, which Kiev blamed on Russian military intervention on behalf of the rebels. Moscow denies its armed forces were involved in the fighting. Poroshenko is on a visit to Washington to bolster US support for his strategy in handling Russian-backed separatists. In a speech to the House of Representatives and Senate, he asked for more aid for Ukraine's military beyond equipment, such as night vision goggles, that Washington has already sent.
I strongly encourage the United States to give Ukraine a special security and defense status, which reflects the highest level of interaction with non-NATO ally. And I also ask that the United States be forceful and stand by its principle with respect of further sanction against the aggressor.
To the world of glamour, Italian fashion house Gucci kicked off Milan Fashion Week for the upcoming Women's Spring-Summer 2015 season with a retro look collection inspired by the 70s. With the use of strong colors ranging from orange, bordeaux, blue, green and white mix, Gucci's aim was to dress a sophisticated and elegant woman who dressed to please herself. Trench coats were worn belted and tight at the waist. Short, wide-legged jeans with nautical buttons were dressed with silk, colorful scarves. The show saw a new version of the Jackie Soft, the tote bag that has become a Gucci mainstay over the years. The South Korean city of Incheon said preparations for the 17th Asian Games were complete. The city will host some 10,000 athletes for the 16-day multi-sport event. The Games will showcase elite Asian talent in 28 Olympic and 8 non-Olympic sports from September 19th to October the 4th, with a total of 439 gold medals. A delegation of over 250 North Korean athletes, coaches and officials will participate in the Games, hoping to raise the reclusive country's profile on the international sporting stage. And former Italian international Alessandro Del Piero arrived in India's capital to join the Delhi Dynamo in the Indian Super League. Del Piero, who won 91 international caps, is one of the biggest stars in the fledgling league and is also lined up to be a brand ambassador for the competition. The former Juventus star left Australian club Sydney FC earlier this year after a 2-year stint that helped lift the A-League's profile, and he will be expected to play a similar role with the 18 Indian Super League. Now, let's see what the weather has in store for us. Cool tonight across many regions with northwesterly fresh winds. Tomorrow, a slight drop in temperatures will create pleasant conditions in most areas, with the appearance of low clouds in the country's northern and central regions and the southern highlands as well. It will remain relatively hot in the Jordan Valley and the Gulf of Aqaba. Winds in Aqaba will be northerly moderate and the sea slightly choppy. Next to the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. Now, our top stories once again. His Majesty the King holds talks with the French President and economic and intellectual leaders during a visit that saw the signing of 6 bilateral agreements. The Prime Minister tells an IMF team that Jordan has achieved positive economic indicators despite regional turmoil. And Scots vote on independence, with polls showing support by a slight edge for the union with England. And that's the end of tonight's news. My name is Raad Btoush. Thank you so much for your company.